and say like, hey, why didn't you get that thing done that you promised you would do? It's like a little bit easier for that person to kind of keep you in the front of their memory. They see you walking past to get to the water cooler. They like, know they're going to see you at lunch. And when they don't have that opportunity to like kind of have that visual reminder, it can be a little more difficult, I think, for certain personality types to kind of always follow up in the same way. But it's definitely something to make note of, and managing urgency and time zones is definitely tricky. Hey, Dick, in your experience, have you used any technology that's been helpful with the time zone management?
Well, I was introduced to Dropbox, and I think that is definitely a technology that probably from the foundation standpoint of various documents, all collateral material, legal documents, there's been a source of a common thread that can run virtually through many people, and I have to confess that I'm not as good at it as I should be, but I think Dropbox is definitely a plus.
Hey, Laura.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Laura, do you have team members that you collaborate with that are at other sites?
Yeah, we have 100 staff members. We have 14 leaders. So it's really tough. I'm down in Jamestown, and we could have all the way up to Niagara Falls. So we do a lot of email and monthly meetings.
Do you get to see each other in person at all, or is it mostly like video meetings or phone calls?
We have physical meetings once a month. Yeah.
That's really great, actually. I didn't realize that you guys went all the way down to Jamestown, but that definitely is like a really wide spread. It's be tricky. So we've talked a little bit about time zones. We've talked a little bit about how follow-up can be different when you don't have the opportunity to always just like poke around the corner and ask someone how a certain project is going. How is it going on collaborating? Like, for example, when you have a document that you have to agree upon as a team, how are you getting that document to be as strong as it could possibly be? Jess and Marcy, I know that you guys are doing a lot of content creation for GiveGab. Do you want to share a little bit about how some of your decisions get made when you can't always be in the same room as one another?
Sure. We usually use Google Docs for things like that, so we can share our documents and make edits and comments and collaborate that way, and that's been very helpful.
Yeah, so is everybody familiar with Google Documents? Seeing a lot of nodding. It's actually excellent, and I didn't realize this, but you can suggest edits in the same way that you would if you were, using track changes on Microsoft Word. So sometimes you don't have all of the formatting that you might like, but you don't miss that opportunity to suggest an edit rather than just making an edit, which is really great. You have the opportunity to comment and resolve comments as you go, and then you can kind of invite people into the document as you need them, and then sort of remove them as you no longer want them to be checking on it. Something that I would be super careful with Google Documents is that forwarding a link to a document to somebody who's not internal to your organization makes it basically permanently accessible. But otherwise, I think in general, it could be a really, really helpful tool. Mm-hmm. And there's also the Dropbox that Dick had talked about. Do any of you have a familiarity with Dropbox? So Dropbox is actually cloud storage for nonprofit organizations and businesses and personal use. But you have the opportunity to rent an amount of storage in the cloud for free, and then you can upgrade if you need to. And it's pretty amazing. You use it just like it was another file on your computer. You drag and drop documents into it or save to it like it was a regular file. And then when you have internet, or it uploads all your content, which is great. Or if you're always on the internet, it just does it simultaneously. But then you can send a link to specific folders to people you're collaborating with on those documents. So in our case, we have folders for each one of our clients, and every client has the link to their folder. So nothing's ever outside of the realm of what they know about their own case, which is really helpful. So that's, I think, a really helpful one. Who's using Slack these days?
We are.
I love it. How do you feel about it? Maybe I shouldn't say I love it first, because then I won't get your honest opinion.
No, I mean, I think it's great. Really convenient, easy to use.
Has
Yeah,
everyone seen Slack? What were you going to say?
I was going to say it's really nice. I mean, we're all, right now, a lot of our team, we only have one remote employee right now, but a lot of our team is located in the same location now. We still use Slack, even though we're all sitting in the same room together. And we have different, like I think, Nikki, you just pulled up, like we have different channels for different teams. So, Marcy, myself, and Michelle have our own creative team channel. So, so that's kind of like conversations that we have just based on our team. So I could see that being really helpful for nonprofits if they have different committees that are working on something, or different, subdivisions that, need to be working on a specific project, but then you can have like a huge overall channel, which is super helpful as well.
Yeah, I pulled mine up on screen share just so that you guys could see what it looks like. It's basically like if you're in a chat room, except that you can attach files to it. So in our world, we have clients in our channels, and then each if you open it up, you could sort of see the conversation that we're having about each one of those clients. I won't do that to kind of protect their confidentiality, but essentially, when a project is running, we have a conversation about that project saying, like, this thing is happening, and then you can attach files to it for the people to review. You can actually integrate it with a task management software, which is really helpful. So I think that winds up being useful for a lot of different things. And then we have some internal projects that we are using it for. In this case, we, for example, had Asana integrated on a lot of these channels that we were using, collaborating with another consultant. So I just kind of wanted you to see what it might look like to use Slack. There's the different hashtag channels for whatever you want to set up. So for example, if you know that you're going to run a lot of conversations about social media, you could always have like a social media channel that you're constantly checking back in with and suggesting things to share, and everyone can set up their own alerts so that you're either getting an email every time you're mentioned, you're getting an email every time you have activity on a specific channel, but it's manageable based on your needs and wants out of each channel. So for example, if I know I'm not working on a specific client, I don't have to subscribe to that channel, or I could just check back in periodically, or if they need me to look at it, they could type my name and Slack will automatically tell me, hey, somebody working on this wants you to look at it, which is really helpful. So I wanted to just see what it looked like. It's a lot like a chat room, but it's organized by topic, and then you can integrate it with different task management softwares, and you can attach files to it, which is really helpful. And it's free. It's 100% free to use, but then they have like paid features that you can add, which is nice. We haven't actually pursued any of those yet. We haven't really needed them. And we've been using it, I think, for like, I want to say a year and a half, and it hasn't become less functional for us, which I think is pretty cool. So in terms of building a team feeling when you might be in different locations, what do you think about how you can do that? We're kind of skipping around on the agenda a little bit because I think we originally thought we might talk about tech later, but the big challenges seem to be, you don't see one another, and so you don't have that same feeling of obligation or responsibility, and that people aren't in the forefront of your thinking. How do you maintain a feeling of team ownership when everyone's so far away? Dick, I haven't heard from you in a while. Do you want to share some ideas?
Well, sometimes I virtually feel like I'm a team of one or two. I think that, that's a real, I think that's a difficult question for me. I think what, coming out of my personality, I would probably say the relationship building skill set is what I try to draw on, and probably that gets down to more of kind of a personal relationship you have, with each member of your team, and being, I guess, the boss or the leader. I think, trying to create an environment where, people motivate themselves to be successful for their own reasons. And I think it works in a big organization. And I also think it probably works in a smaller one, a real small one, like we have with, the foundation. I think from a personality standpoint, I think there's two features of running a business. There's the job performance side, and there's the personality side with dealing with people. And I think if you can include a little bit of the personality side while still maintaining standards, that's probably key, and probably even more so if you're in a virtual environment. Like asking someone, how are they doing today? Or sending them a box of steaks for doing a good job, or, how's your kid? That type of thing. But that's about the only thing I could think that would, really count for a team building in a virtual environment.
So something that I've noticed is that it seems to be a lot harder for certain personality types than for others. Like I've noticed that Tracy loves remote work and like never seems to miss seeing me. She never like asks me out to lunch or anything. But Tracy is, I don't know if you guys have ever done like a DISC personality profile in your team environment. But like Tracy is the exact opposite personality style of me, and I'm like this gigantic extroverted person. And so the whole day goes by and I have like 0 people to hug, and I get really sad about it. And so like I think that there's a chance that like those of us who are a little bit more extroverted and a little bit more fast paced and don't necessarily want to be like left on our own to like do solid quality work might have a little bit of a harder time with a remote office arrangement. And there might be some element of leadership that kind of involves like knowing your personality style. There aren't wrong or right types of personality, and saying like, these are the things I need. So I know that personally, I feel better during the day when I've connected with my staff and clients via phone, not necessarily all of them, but at least a couple. But then I know that as an extrovert, I could easily spend my whole day doing that and never get anything done. So it's all about finding, I think, a balance that works for your personality style. And so there are people who say like, in terms of task management, like I only check email from 9 to 11 and 3 to 4, or like I like open myself up for phone calls for like this amount of time to this amount of time. And those ideas I think are becoming more dated, because when you work remotely, you kind of have to be accessible. And it's the same as being like in an office. But at the same time, I think that there might be some things we can learn from them, saying like, this is my time to kind of make some connections. Like I'm going to sit down today and I'm going to call a client that I haven't spoken to directly in a while and just ask how they're doing. Or, I haven't spoken to the staff who have my same role at the Niagara Falls office in a while. So maybe I'll give them a call and say like, hey, how's it going? And maybe like brainstorm about some challenge that you're having. And that I think might be an opportunity that you kind of need to like make time for, I'm a big believer in yoga and exercise and walking, and it's a discipline. I feel better when I do it, and it makes me a better person when I do it. But I kind of need to say like, this is really important, and I'm going to sit down and like make time for this important activity. And I think it's harder because, as an extrovert, like I'm kind of like genuinely looking for those opportunities in my everyday life, but like making that extra step where it's not expected can be a tricky thing when there's other important rush things to do. But I think in terms of like my long-term mental health and feeling about my career choices, like I just need to know that there are certain things that are true about me. So like, while it might be okay for somebody like Tracy to like, you know, send a couple of messages, get the thing done, and just like go back to working, like I'm just like, I don't know, I'm too much of like a pack animal for that. Like, I'm not like a lone wolf, but I think it comes to like knowing yourself. And so I think we talked about this a little bit when we talked about our boards and like, how do we connect with our board members who tend to be volunteers and that we see less. There seemed to be a lot of communication about like, you know what, they might need a phone call, they might need a handwritten note. And maybe that's still true when you're working with a remote team. You know, when your team is scattered across the US, maybe an occasional phone call to like your graphic designer to just say like, hey, I just want you to know I thought you did a great job on that project, or somebody in a similar role to you that's in another office to say like, hey, you know, I think that I thought that point you made at the meeting was great, and I just wanted to let you know that I thought this or that about it, or something like that. I think, you know, those things can be really, really encouraging for the person on the receiving end and really foster good communication. But on the other side, you know, there's a chance that you'll feel better having done it if you're kind of on that extroverted, faster paced side of work. So I don't know what you think about that, but it seems to be something that my work life feels better when I make sure that I regularly include it. What do you think about, even when your teams are far apart, trying to schedule time where you're all either in the same physical space or the same mental space? Like, for example, a meeting like this, like Roundtable, do you think that this is something that it could be useful to your team if you're not all in the same place? Like, we've been attempting to do this for City of Light for a while now, because of all of our consultants, only 2 of us are in the same city. So we were trying to figure out like, how can we sit down, and we were thinking of doing like a lunch meeting where we all like kind of get our sandwich and like meet. But it's hard because we all have different schedules, but at the end of a meeting like this, there's a chance that people could feel more aligned with the position. What do you think?
Nikki, we actually do something. Sorry, Dick. Go ahead.
No, I think a meeting like that would be important only if you have a great agenda and you can have some good takeaways from it. I think that especially in our organization, it's extremely difficult to get 2 of the principal players on the media side who actually, believe it or not, are the 2, I would say, for lack of a better word, being new in the production business. They're kind of the media celebrities, or the stars of the TV series, and they are radio show they're talk show hosts on the East Coast. So it's, you know, trying to get them involved in a meeting like that sometimes proves to be quite a challenge. But I think the key thing is if you have a firm agenda of things that have to be addressed and will produce takeaways, I think probably people would be more responsive to that type of meeting, I guess.
That's great feedback. Thank you. Jess, what you were saying, you do something similar?
Yeah, our company does something very similar, just called All Hands Lunch. And so usually that's run by our CEO, Charlie, and the whole team will gather together. Either, you know, like I said, we only have 1 person that's remote right now, but we used to probably have about 1/3 of our company used to be remote. And they would just join from, you know, wherever, using Google Hangouts. And then basically while we're all eating lunch, you know, Charlie would kind of do an overview of things that were going on in the company and kind of reporting on the things that we don't necessarily hear day to day, like how certain deals are going, or how, you know, a certain, I don't know, meeting went. So it's good for all of us to kind of get together and touch base, and it kind of opens the floor up too for conversation with Charlie and and the strategy team. So it's nice. We do that usually every other week on like a Thursday, or we actually had ours today. And so that's been really helpful in the past to kind of create the sense of like everyone's getting together, we're all eating, whether they're remote or not. And then as far as the in-person sort of meetings, in the past, like I said, when we had more remote employees, we did try to get together at least once a year and try to get everybody to fly in. And that is really difficult, especially in a nonprofit setting where there's maybe not a budget to fly people in. But it is nice for camaraderie. And that's why I think, having tools like Slack where it becomes more of a daily sort of flow. It's not as like slow as email can sometimes be really slow, because and lengthy, whereas that sort of instant message sort of feel can make you kind of feel like you're more with that person, even though you're just sort of chatting. So I do think there are a lot of tools, like you mentioned, Slack and trying to use Google Video Chat for different things is very helpful.
Yeah, I can't say enough about how Slack was so helpful. Even like it just in terms of like helping us develop a cohesive culture and like giving the opportunity for team members who may not have ordinarily had the chance to offer feedback on a particular opportunity because it would have happened between two people and not the whole team. I think that was so helpful as a culture building entity. And there were even just like little things like a team emoji that kind of came up all the time. And even though that's not, necessarily a thing that you, in the long term, like you don't need a team emoji, it doesn't necessarily like increase your productivity in the short term. But in the long term, I think having people that feel really connected to the organization and that you work with easily and can talk to easily about concerns has a monetary value, and Slack is free. So, but the nice, I think that it is a nice thing about Slack is that it can be that constant hum, that kind of like office feel. The flying in and the in-person has so many logistical challenges, but there is something really nice about all being in the same room or the same virtual room. And so I think that could be a really helpful thing. Any other questions before we kind of wrap up about challenges you faced being in a remote team or technology solutions you wanted to suggest to the group, anything like that?
There's just one of my personal pieces. I've worked in remote teams professionally and voluntarily that always comes up when you're communicating digitally is people will always assume the absolute worst tone on anything you say. So if you're offering critique over text or email or something like that, you have to it's one of those emails you type and delete, type and delete, type and delete until you know. So if you can have a face-to-face conversation where body language comes through and, it's like, hey, I'm not yelling at you. Sometimes that's really cool. I mean, like, heck, even in a marital situation, I'm assuming my husband's yelling at me. He might have just said I found this, but it's like, why didn't you put it away? So, the tone doesn't always come through, and it's like super critical, I think.
Yeah, no, that's so important. And like, I feel like I try to manage this by like putting like emoji smiley faces, but then I feel like if I don't choose the wrong one, it looks like it's a sarcastic smiley face or like that, like uber nice, but sort of mean girl smiley face. And I think about it way, way too much and probably still come off a little meaner than I mean to. I once sent an email to Dick Montgomery that involved a link to a YouTube video where people were slapping each other with fish, and I still think it got taken too seriously.
That was a good one.
Can you send me that video, Nikki?
I absolutely will send it to you. It's your going away present from
I couldn't ask for anything more.
That's not necessary, Nikki.
The slapping people with fish or giving Marcy a going away present?
Just kidding.
So I think that's definitely an interesting one. Has anybody had any success managing the tone of written communication? I think I mean, I think 2 years ago it felt like emojis had no place in the professional world, and now it feels like they have like a little bit. There's like a little bit more leeway. But what else is there to manage? I've actually included, because my work involves telling people hard things sometimes, I've actually included like a line in parentheses at the bottom of the email, like, please know that I'm saying this with the most amount of love possible, or things like that. But what's working for you? What's helping to manage some of that tonal stuff?
I think it becomes a lot easier, irregardless of the size of your organization, based on the longevity of the relationship. Because when you're communicating via email or even over the telephone, if you could, I can think back to, early on when I had relationships with certain people, just one word over the telephone, and they can become offended or they can become hurt because they don't know who you are or who your personality is. So, the longer a relationship matures, I think it's like, two brothers, they say, well, they finish each other's sentences. As long as relationships, even in your own family life, I think the more knowledge you have of a person, what you can say and not say. And I think when you really get to know them, you can say any damn thing you want, probably, and they'll take it the right way.
Hey, Laura and Marcy, you guys have been quiet for a while. Do you have any insights to share? No, that's okay. Don't worry, I won't make you talk.
Nikki, I was going to say that, tone is really difficult when you're trying to like get across maybe something constructive, but you don't want to come off as like being too short, and you don't want to come off as being too like lengthy and passive. Like, you're trying to make your point and being articulate about that. And I would say that my best recommendation is to like write it as you would say it, and then just kind of read through it, and then sort of look back and sit and like kind of read it without like judging it, and just say, okay, what could I change about this to make it seem less brash or like abrasive if it is. And especially if you're using, it's all in the approach, and I think being able to say, I think that is a great idea, but what do you think about this? And then, or, you know what I mean? Instead of just saying, I think that's a terrible idea, or, no, or, just being really like quick to answers. So I think, just being articulate in what you say, and just reading it and know that, like, hopefully you have good judgment on it and that you're not going to hurt anyone's feelings. But it is really hard to manage like email communications. And I would also say that if an email gets longer than like a paragraph, or that maybe it's not meant to be an email, maybe that's meant to be a phone conversation that you need to have directly with somebody, because, when an email gets lengthy, or maybe there needs to be a meeting around it. So that would be my next, piece of advice.
Yeah, I think that's great. Actually, like something that I kind of made a practice of when I was working at a nonprofit with like a lot of very sensitive women. Like, it was like, I'm kind of like that person who walks into your room and is like, this is what I think. This is what I think. But they were very like feeling-y, and I don't know how else to say it. Like, I would write emails and just be kind of in a rush and be like, this is what I think about this. But they would read it as, this is what I think about this. So I would just like kind of write what I meant to say, and then be like, I should like ask about their summer, and then like close by saying that I hope their daughter is well. And then like my work relationships amazingly changed. And it's still something that I have to kind of like think about, because in my mind, it's like you're sending the email for the reason you're sending the email, just get the email out. But it's been super helpful with certain personalities to be really mindful of the fact that like, they treat email more like letter and I treat it more like text. And like, I think Tracy and I are in a pretty good rhythm with our email communication. But it takes a while with every new person to figure out like what kind of communication they would really benefit from hearing from me. And that's kind of a thing that takes some work. So thanks for that, Jess, because I think you're totally right about the reread.
You got to find that, like you said, you got to find that rhythm with that person maybe before you really understand how your communication style needs to go moving forward.
Yeah. Also, I think that there's just sensitive words in general in the English language that kind of like come off even harder in text. And I had a professor who would say like, instead of saying like that was wrong or that made me mad, he would always say like, I was confused to read X, or like I found that perplexing. And it's just like it just softened it a little bit and internalized it. Like it was less about your product and more about how it was being consumed by a third party. And so maybe your product did need the work, but it wasn't about you. Like it depersonalized it. And I think that there's a way to do that in a lot of communication that we could always be a little bit more thoughtful about out loud and on text. I think. Any last thoughts before we give it a wrap up? And I'm going to send out links to all the resources we talked about today. Going once, going twice. Awesome. Hey, thanks for joining us for Roundtable. We're really excited. We're considering taking a break for the summer because it seems like we might not catch as many people to have a round table. It might be kind of like a triangular table. So I think that we might take a break and restart in the fall, but we are going to send out a survey and hopefully catch some questions from you. And it's an organizational tool that I really hope can be helpful to your group and your team. So expect an email from us with an outline of these resources we discussed, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the fall. Have a great day, guys.
Bye, Nikki.